And welcome to the second edition of our fall candidate forum series. Tonight, we will be having a great discussion with three candidates for our Pittsburgh School Board. Really looking forward to this conversation. We have Tracey Reed running in District 5, Jamie Piotrowski running in District 7, and Gene Walker, who is running in District 9. Unfortunately, Veronica Edwards, who is also running for District 9 and is the current incumbent, was not able to join us due to a meeting that the school board is having right now. And they're interviewing current candidates for interim superintendent, an issue that I'm sure we will get into. The Pittsburgh Public Schools have been so much in the news. I guess before we jump into the conversation, is there any just initial thoughts you have about the state of the schools in Pittsburgh, which has just been all over the news, not only over the last month or so, but really, over the last several years?
Yes, there has been, especially in the past week, there's been a lot of attention going on surrounding the schools with the announcement that, the local hospital is running out of beds because of COVID-19. A lot of children, school-age children, are getting COVID-19 and having long-term issues. And so there's been a lot of conversation about the safety and the regulation and the processes and the supports for parents of PPS students, but students in general. There has been a lot of conversation about the communication, the way parents are being informed, alerted to issues and decisions, who's being invited, who has access to the school board members and the superintendent. So there's been a lot of conversation, and of course, we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into it, one of the reasons we are here is that on November 2nd, we do have an election. And if you are a parent, you're a student who is 17, will be 18 by November 2nd. We want to encourage you to register to vote. The voter registration deadline is going to be October 18th. That is going to be, again, October 18th. And if you're not sure if you want to vote in person or by mail, the vote by mail application deadline is October 26th. So you have a couple more extra weeks to make that decision. But please make sure, if these issues that we talk about today are something that you care about and you're a resident of Pittsburgh, or you're a resident of a place that has a school board race, please make sure you're registered to vote. Here in Pennsylvania, the deadline is October 18th to register to vote, and to register to vote by mail, the deadline is October 26th. Keep in mind that you must have your voter registration stuff submitted on time. They are not extending things this year due to the COVID-19, so you don't get extra days. You must have everything in on time by close of business in order to get your stuff counted. So make sure you register to vote and you're registering to vote before the deadline.
Thank you for that. And before we introduce our guest for this evening, we wanted to give a quick little background on the board of directors for the Pittsburgh Public Schools. It is an elected body made up of 9 representatives within the city of Pittsburgh and the borough of Mount Oliver. It also serves as the board for the Pittsburgh/Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit, one of 29 regional intermediate units in Pennsylvania established to provide such services as special education and programs for non-public students. Board members are elected to 4-year terms. It is the policy-making body for the school district, and according to their website, is committed to providing the best education possible for every student by providing outstanding teachers, programs, services that enable every student to achieve their maximum potential. So that's directly from Pittsburgh Public Schools website. We're gonna now introduce our three guests, starting with Tracey Reed from District 5, Jamie Piotrowski for District 7, and Gene Walker for District 9. Welcome to the One Hood Power School Board Fall Candidate Forum.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we'll start with Tracey, and we're going to jump right into it because there's so much to talk about. But let's we all know the elephant in the room. Superintendent recently resigning. Obviously all the controversy, but want to give an opportunity for each of you to give your assessment, of the Hamlet era at PPS, starting with Tracey, then Jamie, and then Gene.
Yeah. So if we look at where we are right now in Pittsburgh Public Schools, enrollment is down by nearly 3,000 kids. Charter school enrollment is up by 1,000 kids. Central office staff has increased by more than 100 new positions. 31% of Black kids are reading at proficiency at the 3rd grade level, which means 69% are not reading at grade level. And I pick out 3rd grade reading simply because that is a really fundamental milestone in kids' educational development. And most kids, if they're not reading on grade level by 3rd grade, will continue to have problems as they're moving through school. So we have 31% of our Black students who are reading on grade level by 3rd grade. 8th grade math is another good predictor of later school success, and 9% of Black kids were proficient in math in the 8th grade. So we have 30% of our kids who are completing college or trade school within 6 years of graduating. That's one of the main tenets of the district strategic plan, is that every student is college and career ready. 46% of our 9th graders are chronically absent. That's when kids are absent for 10% of the school year. 56% of 9th grade Black 9th graders are chronically absent. And 13% of our Black students are suspended at least one time. That's where we are in Pittsburgh Public. So my assessment of the Hamlet era at PPS is not, it is not a strong era at all. I think that we've done some damage to the district. I think that we can get back on track. And I remain really concerned about how our kids are doing in our schools, because we are experiencing an unprecedented time because of COVID. And on top of that, our handling of COVID has been less than stellar.
Thank you, Tracey. Jamie, the same question, your assessment of the Hamlet era.
Yes, thank you. I don't want to, repeat too many points of what Tracey said. All very accurate, all very true. And I think during our earlier campaigning season, we've been repeating a lot of the same statistics and studies and things that have. And it hasn't been that long of a time either since the primary until this point. But just seeing even from then to the present day, in light of COVID especially, I mean, we have the Delta variant, we have all these other letters of the Greek alphabet variants, more children, we're seeing more children get infected with this virus, the possibilities of schools being closed. I think one of what I think we should be most concerned about moving forward is a communication plan for how the district is going to be communicating about, COVID infections, COVID rates. I just haven't really seen clear messaging, and it's been, concerning for a lot of parents and people in general. I mean, I have just been concerned in general. I am so, scared and worried for our kids and for our families. There are a lot of kind of forces working against not just the district, but, people want to go back to work and they want to go back to normal. And it's really hard for our schools to go back to normal when right now our kids can't necessarily be vaccinated, although hopefully there is some, good news moving forward for 5 years and up. However, these effects are still going to be long-term for our kids. And to Tracey's point about reading scores and test scores and suspensions, these are not just going to disappear when COVID disappears. This is something that our next superintendent and our next board is definitely going to have to address as a top priority, making sure that our kids still have access to an equitable education, despite all of the disadvantages that COVID is exposing, even more than what already existed. So I'm really looking forward to working with new members. I know everything sounds very doom and gloom, but I'm very excited for the opportunities moving forward with our likely new members. And I know that we'll talk a little bit more into this about what we expect for our new superintendent, but I'm really looking forward to that process and having the community very involved, and highlighting their priorities and not just the priorities of the board of directors.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Gene?
Thanks again for having us all here today. I think my assessment of the Hamlet era is we spent 5 years getting lots of big promises and seeing most, if not all, of those promises broken. And unfortunately, it started from the very beginning. And, where we hoped to have a transformational leader, we unfortunately got something other. And so as we look at student achievement, we see that the gaps between Black and brown students and white students are widening. When we look at just the overall health of our district, we see that we have less kids with a bigger budget. And so as we look forward, it's really important that we focus not just on everything that we hoped we had in the last 5 years, but really focus on what we are going to look to bring to the district in the coming years as the new board steps in. And so it's going to be really critical for the current board to choose an interim leader that will get us through the next 6 or 7 or 8 months. And then for the new board to really jump in with both feet to make sure that we bring the transformational leader that we all hope to have here in Pittsburgh here for hopefully the start of the 22-23 school year.
Thank you, Gene. And Miracle will ask the next round of questions.
Yes. So you all have been campaigning for maybe a little over a year now, hearing the concerns of students and parents alike. So my question, and we're going to go with Jamie, Tracey, then Gene, is what will be your top priority as a school board member when you take office?
Yes, thank you, Miracle. So I think, with, again, not to beat a dead horse or anything, but, with COVID still being a thing and still, being, cases increasing and, this virus just spreading, not having ICU beds at our children's hospital, COVID and COVID safety is certainly going to be a priority, even though we will not be sworn in until December. This is something that's going to be with us for a very long time. So making sure that our board policies and our school policies focus on the safety of our students. And for more long-term priorities, again, making sure that our children and our students have access to an equitable education. So focusing on, what the needs are of our individual schools, making sure that our students, have their individual needs met rather than just some kind of, a one-size-fits-all plan, because we know that doesn't work. So following all with that, I think COVID is definitely going to be one of my top priorities because, the longer lasting effects, again, is just going to be something that's going to affect our equity. It's going to affect how kids get to school, how often they're getting there, how well they're doing. And so following that also, really trying to pump up our community schools model so that we can help fill those gaps that is going to be present because of the lasting effects of COVID.
When I think about my top priorities, I think, again, like Jamie said, I think about COVID, keeping kids and their families, keeping educators and all the adults who are working in school buildings safe. That's, priority number one. And then finding a great superintendent. We have to make sure that we are really transparent and we are just dogged about finding someone who is going to be great for our district. We have to make sure the district is smartly spending COVID relief funds. And I think one of the lessons that I think that we should learn from our current circumstances is that we have to be vigilant, ensuring that the district not only has those big goals, but also our central office not only has those big goals, but also detailed, realistic, doable plans to get to those goals, and the personnel, not by hiring people, but by hiring the right people so that those plans get to be executed effectively. We won't get to the equitable district, the high quality equitable district that our kids deserve, that our region deserves, until we are a really well managed district. And so that's really that's my top priority.
Yeah, so I agree with all of those. So I won't repeat those two priorities because they are important. But I think from my perspective, the most important thing that we can do is begin to repair the damage done to our reputation and the trust that the community has in both the school board and the school district. And so it's our job, and it will be our job as school board members to hire a superintendent who will come in here with the sole job and priority of earning the right to educate the kids of Pittsburgh, because that is, that's our job. No one has to send their kids to Pittsburgh public schools. We have to earn that right, and we do that through being morally and ethically good, being respectable, having good communication, and being upfront and honest about the plans that we have in front of us and the struggles that we're going to face to get there. And so my top priority will be to begin to repair our standing in the community and work alongside the rest of the board and the interim and then new superintendent to make sure that we earn the right to educate our kids.
Well, thank you to that, and that's a great segue, Jean. We'll go Tracey, Jean, Jamie for this round. And my question is, you mentioned, Jean, this process of identifying a new superintendent. So the next question is, what qualities are you looking for in the next superintendent? And as you begin your tenures as school board members, obviously one of the first orders of business is going to be this search. So what will you be looking for in PPS's next superintendent?
So we need a visionary leader, someone who, and not visionary like we have to have a great district, but visionary, bold. Someone with bold vision that's very forward thinking. We need a leader who is data savvy, who is really committed to keeping families, kids, educators, teachers. I'm always shocked at how out of the loop teachers are with regard to what's going on in the district. And we need a district leader who is just very committed to keeping those people who are most important in the loop. We need somebody, like I said before, with really bold ideas, but not just the bold ideas, that have bold ideas and either she or he can help to see those ideas materialize, or they know how to hire people, excellent hires who can make those big, bold ideas to see them into fruition. And the thing that I think when you think about like really high quality, good superintendents, they don't have to be super charismatic people. We certainly can't expect someone who knows how to do everything, but we do need someone who has that big vision, who has who is willing to make really good hires, who is able to make good hires, and who can sort of guide the district in the direction that we need to go. And so those are the things we'll be looking for: someone who's visionary, data savvy, and really committed to kids and families.
So I'm going to be looking for similar things, but really it starts really with finding a candidate who has a proven track record and history of improving student outcomes, specifically in urban areas, and with Black and brown kids. That's first and foremost. Second, we need someone who's a strong communicator. And so, like Tracey said, it's not necessarily the most charismatic person, but it's the person who can develop the plan and then communicate how the plan is going to be put in place, and then implement the plan, and then communicate throughout the process. And that comes with someone who has a track record of honesty and transparency. So I'll be looking for that. And then finally, I want someone who's committed to bringing integrity and accountability back to the district. So for so long, we've believed that we deserve to do this work, and we don't. We have to earn that every day by coming in and showing up and doing the best for our kids. And so our next superintendent has to be someone who comes in and is accountable for themselves, but also hires staff that is accountable to the students that we serve. And so those are the top three that I'm going to be looking for in the new superintendent. And then as we get together with the rest of the board, I'm sure we will add to that list.
Yeah, I mean, again, to not to, repeat everything that Tracey and Jean have said, but to Tracey's point about, looking at data within the district and being able to use that data to move the district forward. I think a good point too is to, utilize all of these studies that have constantly been done in Pittsburgh. We have our gender equity study. We have studies about how air quality affects education. Just study after study, and it seems that elected officials and other people in high standing just kind of never seem to actually take action on these studies. And I would really love to see someone actually point to one of those studies and say, how are we going to solve this problem? And so actually using these evidence-based practices to move the district forward. And yes, someone who is of good ethical and moral character. I mean, we've read the ethics report, and malintended or not, I would love to have a superintendent who doesn't have to question whether or not they're acting ethically or morally in a particular situation, being transparent with the board, with the public, with our staff and teachers, but also understanding that this board of directors is also supposed to hold the superintendent accountable. And so, making sure that there's also someone who can own up to their mistakes and then, say, how do we move forward and how do we make this better? So while it is sort of, I would love it to be a little bit of like a teamwork aspect, but, still understanding that the relationship between the board and the superintendent, that they are not the same position, and that, the board is there to hold the superintendent accountable and move the district forward. And then lastly, really just being realistic about, what their vision is for the future of the district, short and long-term goals, because, what has happened over the last 5 years and even longer, is not something that goes away overnight. So, even with a new superintendent, it's not something that's just going to be fixed in a month or two. It is going to take a lot of hard work. And so having somebody who has that proven track record, working with schools, having this proven record of leadership to turn the district around.
Thank you so much for those answers. For the next question, if you're elected, you're coming into a time where there are debates about private schools, charter schools, public schools. There is the issue of whether Wilkinsburg will become a part of the city Or should there be a Wilkinsburg resident on the school board with more voting power? There's also a lot of issues that you alluded to earlier when it comes to racial disparities. What are some of the things that you believe make you uniquely qualified to serve the school board at this time? And I'll start with Jean, Tracey, then Jamie.
Thanks for that question. There was a lot in there. But I think there are several things that I believe make me one of the best candidates to be on the school board. And it starts just with my experience as a PPS grad, the father of two PPS grads, and someone who worked very closely with the district for a little over 9 years in my time at the Promise. I bring a really unique perspective to the work of school board member. And so I will draw on those experiences both as a student and a father and someone who worked with the district to really think just big and bold about how we move this district forward. I'm a believer in big plans, but big plans alone don't get it done. We need to also be able to implement that plan and do it in a way that's successful. And so what I would be pushing for as a school board member is, wanting to see the details of the plan and how it's going to interact and work in our community with our families, with our students. And if we bring the rest of Wilkinsburg in, then that just makes the job even more important because we have more young people that we get to serve. And so, my experience as a nonprofit leader, as a financial consultant, as a father, as a former graduate, I think leaves me in a different space, one that brings lots of expertise that we don't currently have on the board to bear.
Thank you, Tracey, then Jamie.
Uniquely qualified to serve on the board because I know firsthand that Black kids who come from families without a bunch of money can learn at high levels in public schools in Pittsburgh. I am one of those Black kids who went to a high performing, high quality, all Black, mostly low income public school. And so I don't buy into the idea that we have to accept less for or from kids who don't have advantages. I have very nuanced views of education. I think that also makes me uniquely qualified. I don't come from any one, sort of ideological perspective. I have nuanced views of education. I don't accept ideas without evidence. I know wholeheartedly that if Wilkinsburg becomes a part of the city of Pittsburgh, then redistricting will have to happen, and we will have to make sure that Wilkinsburg kids are also represented on the school board. I think that the other thing that makes me uniquely qualified is that when I make a decision, it is not based on what ideology tells me to think. I don't shy away from thinking hard thoughts. And so I think those things make me uniquely qualified. I was also a high school English teacher, and I have a PhD in education policy. So.
Thank you. So I think, I've been working in the community for not really a very long time. I'm still, in the beginnings of my career and everything. But, I grew up in the district that I'd be representing. I've kind of worked a multitude of different levels of jobs in the nonprofit and private sectors and government, so seeing and having all of these different experiences and working with different populations, with different people in power, those who are not in power, building these relationships across communities. I've had a lot of, I've learned a lot in a short amount of time, and then, returned back to school at a nationally ranked social work school. So I went to Pitt I'm a licensed social worker in Pennsylvania, so I have a lot of these different skills at the systems and the direct practice kind of level. And I think, a lot of my skills and part of my priorities in having this position is really bringing the community and individual focus to the school board. And so, really going into the community and then hearing directly from them, rather than sitting and waiting for an email or waiting for the board meeting to hear public comment. I've been very proactive in reaching out to different groups within my district and even outside my district, just to hear, different priorities from across the city. And with my social work profession, I also adhere to a code of ethics, which is very important to me and is not just some sort of poster I hang on my wall or anything for show. I take my profession incredibly seriously, and it is really just reflected in my work. I work in communities now, one-on-one as a project manager. I work a lot alongside our city councilors. I have relationships with our state representatives, community leaders in my district. I'm really just trying to be essentially like a megaphone for my district, and having the ability and the humility to be able to sit and tell my constituency that I don't know everything all the time, I think is actually a really important quality to lead, so that I can bring the community together and bring those ideas to the table, to the larger board, working together rather than just rubber stamping everything. And I also have a degree in public policy as well. And so I, critically think about every little thing all the time. And maybe it's not so great, for my own day-to-day life, but in my professional life, I think very hard about everything, think about how it's going to affect my community, constituents, students, everybody down the line, and same goes for my colleagues and my future colleagues, is also thinking critically and holding my colleagues accountable as well for our students and families. And so I guess it's really just a long-winded way of saying, I'm not afraid to say I don't know, and I'm also not afraid, to call other people out and have these discussions. Our district is at a critical turning point, and I think it's time that we just have honest conversations with each other rather than a lot of grandstanding. And I think that a lot of these viewpoints make me very unique for the position.
Thank you, Gahari.
Yeah. So we've been making record time here. You're all are doing a wonderful job answering the question. So this was a question that wasn't presented earlier, but has been alluded to numerous times in your remarks. Excuse me. Accountability. I think we've heard, the word accountability numerous times from each of the candidates that's joining us tonight. So my question, we'll start with Jamie, go to Tracey, then Jean. One, do you feel like the current board has done enough to hold each other and now the former, or the outgoing superintendent, because it's not yet October, accountable? And what will you do, as a school board member, to promote more accountability beginning with your term? So we'll start with Jamie.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, just, scribbling everything down as we're talking. And again, to my point is saying that sometimes I don't know everything. I'm not sure if I can answer if the current board has necessarily held the current superintendent fully accountable. I've heard lots of different stories from lots of different sources. And, based on, the recent reporting with the ethics report and everything, and Dr. Hamlet choosing to resign, I obviously think that was a good move on his part. Had the board had to have moved to a vote to have him removed, then I think it might have been a little bit of a different story. I think, and to that point of me not knowing necessarily how to answer this question, I think part of that is because the communication between the board and the public doesn't always seem to really quite be there. The board has kind of been like this nebulous entity where if you wanted to find something out, you really had to go and dig for information. And so I really think it's important, and I'll be doing this myself, but, just making sure that, there are opportunities that I make myself available outside of, the public comment period or like the regular email chains, share news with constituents, whether that's, through like a newsletter or Twitter or something like that. Obviously what is, able to be shared. But I think that has kind of been part of the issue, is that, folks can't necessarily form a full opinion because they don't know what's going on. And so, I've seen a lot of frustration, with families within the district, just again, never knowing what's going on and having to hear news from other parents rather than from the board or the district themselves. And so I think, for holding this current board accountable, is making sure that we have some sort of channel for communication that is regular communication, that is, transparent, especially as we go to choose a new superintendent come December, is making sure that the public knows how that process works and that it's not a bunch of, behind closed doors kinds of activities. Families and students deserve to know what's going on, not just as, taxpayers or anything, but, as people who, well, yes, taxpayers, but, also, their children are enrolled in the district. And even if they are not, children within this school, will come out of this school and, families would expect them to be appropriately prepared. And so we really, I think, just need to, again, have this better communication channel so that everybody knows what's going on and that answers can't be hidden. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that a huge part of holding someone accountable is having high standards. And I think that the current board didn't necessarily have the highest standards for the superintendent. The fact that we have not made much progress academically did not seem to impede their renewing his contract and giving and voting for him to get a raise. The fact that we are losing students, that there's been lots of turnover at central office, none of that seemed to sway the board away from like this really dogged support for the superintendent. And so you have to ask yourself, if they're holding him accountable, what is the standard? And that's what I think is incredibly problematic. And I agree that there has been some like sort of shroud over board activity, and that needs to be removed to the extent that it can be removed, and kids and educators can stay safe. But that sort of that shroud of secrecy where the board chooses does not bid for a search firm to find a superintendent, or there are questionable sort of relationships between maybe the superintendent and the head of the search firm, or those kinds of things that and that's just alleged, but those are the things that have sort of been happened under some sort of shroud of secrecy. I think that the board has to be more accountable to its constituents, right? So we have to, if I'm elected to the board, then it's going to be part of my job to communicate with constituents, to let them know the things that are happening. I think it's really, really important that a board member not only be the person that you call when something, bad has gone on, but they're the person that you hear from about what's happening in our district. And so that's another, sort of accountability that has to happen. And just like the board has to have high standards and hold the superintendent accountable to those standards, the public has to have high standards and hold the board accountable to those standards. And so that when I think about accountability, I think not just, who's accountable to whom, but also I think about what are the standards that we're holding people to, that we're holding them accountable to.
So when I think about accountability, a couple of things come to mind. The first is that we do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because we're forced to do the right thing. And so when I think about the last even just 2 years of our time with Dr. Hamlin and time with this board, I feel like we've fallen short in that area, because I think we lucked into the right outcome because the ethics investigation came out and it was so damning that we didn't have an option. But I don't know if you get points for doing the right thing because you were forced to do the right thing. And so as I think through how do we ensure that as a board we hold the superintendent who's coming in accountable to do the job that they're hired to do, it starts with making sure that they have a plan that they can communicate, implement, and then report on. And then if and when that person falls short on those goals, then we take concrete steps to correct what went wrong and move us back in the right direction. And so Jamie mentioned it earlier, right? Our job is not to be a rubber stamp for everything that comes through the superintendent's office. Our job is to challenge everything that comes through so that when we begin to put our plan into place, it is the best possible version that we can do successfully for the most amount of kids. And then as a board, when I think about accountability, it's very similar. It's doing what's right because it's right, even if it means that we're going to maybe not get reelected, next time around. I would rather do the right thing and lose my job than to do something else and potentially continue to make those same mistakes over and over again. And so as a board member and as a board, we have to both be accountable to the people that we serve in our district, but also understand that our districts are not they're not inclusive of just the area that we represent. And so, my kids lived in District 9, but went to school in Oakland. And so my school board rep who was in District 9 was one person, but the one who was taking care of my kid's school was someone else. And so we have to make sure that as a board that we keep in mind that Pittsburgh and the way that our school system is set up, sure, we have constituents that live in our district, but we also have students who live in other districts who go to school in our district. And so we need to be accountable to each other to make sure that we are working together to bring the best outcomes to our students, regardless of where they live and where they go to school. And so that starts by having an honest conversation with each other about what we expect. And how we expect to interact with each other, how we expect to treat each other, and understand that when we work as close together as we will, it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be fun. But if we do the right thing because it's the right thing at the end of the day, we're going to be in a much better position than we would otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Back to Miracle.
Yeah, and this is also not a pre-screened question. You all talked a lot about education and accountability and conversation. We know the past year there's been conversations about critical race theory, about policing in schools, about accepting people, refugees from other countries due to international policies. There's a lot that happens at the school board beyond education. How do you yourselves find information about current events? How do you educate yourselves about what's going on with these various issues? And how do you engage people with different or altering viewpoints so that you can make informed decisions about how, or in the future, how to vote on specific topics? Because outside of education, there's a whole host of cultural and social issues that you also have to vote on as board members. And we'll go Tracey, Jean, Jamie.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks, Miracle. So when I think about things like critical race theory or mask mandates or refugees in schools or, a whole host of those, sort of trigger topics that get people sort of passionate about what's happening in schools and that bring people out to school board meetings and have recently been really sort of inflammatory with the rhetoric and with and in some cases even violent. When I think about those issues, one, I come again from a place of trying to understand what the issues are, how people's fears are playing into their positions. If you think about any of those specific positions, take, for example, critical race theory. Fundamentally, critical race theory does not happen in K-12 schools. And that the fact that it doesn't really happen in K-12 schools, that what people are sort of fighting against is teaching real history or including people who are not sort of dead white men as part of the literature and history that's told or that's taught in schools. The fact that that's not critical race theory does not impact how passionate people are about not putting critical race theory in schools. So the fact that it's not really a thing doesn't really matter to people. And so that becomes a very difficult issue to fight against, because we're not really talking about facts or data or even reality. What we're talking about is people are fighting about fear. They're fighting about their fears of their culture being erased, their fears that their kids might feel bad about being white, their fears that that they will not maintain a certain status. And that's virtually impossible to fight against. One of the things that I try to do is I try to stay informed so that I know if an issue is an actual issue or if it is a sort of conflated idea about something that folks are quote unquote arguing about, but we're not really arguing about that thing that we say we're arguing about. So one of the things, like I said, I try to stay informed. I try to talk about reality, facts, and not get into folks' ideology, not get into people's fears. But if we can approach these things like from a factual basis, I think we'll do better in getting over some of the issues that we're fighting, we're sort of battling in schools. Again, the problem is that much of what's happening is not really it's not really what we're much of what we're fighting about isn't really what we're fighting about, right? And so when I think about engaging people with alternate viewpoints, what I try to always do is, again, talk about facts, talk about what is real, talk about how how these things are actually playing out, and try in that way to appeal to people's sort of their greater humanity, appeal to their critical thinking, appeal to their to logic in many cases. So I don't know if I answered the question, but the bottom line is, when we get to these social cultural issues, the what we're really fighting about is not what is necessarily on the table.
Wow, this is a fantastic question. And, I don't know if there is necessarily a straightforward answer, other than to say that I have tried really hard to continue to learn each and every day. And so whether it's, browsing news outlets, watching, segments of the One Hood Power Hour when I have a chance, listening to other candidates and other folks in the community, it's really important for me to know and to really kind of trust in that. It's not always about winning an argument. It's about understanding where people are coming from, being willing to agree to disagree when the time is right. And as we look at how, as a school board member, we take in so much information and how we should vote on things, it's really important for me to have a group of folks, trusted advisors, folks that I can bounce ideas off of, some of whom I know think a little differently about some things than I do, and have really a diversity in input coming in, so that I can make the best possible informed decisions that I can. And so, like Tracey mentioned, right, sometimes what we're fighting about is not really what we're fighting about. And so understanding that I don't have to win every fight is key. And then finally, it comes down to having a conviction for the decision that I'm going to make, trusting that I've done my due diligence in looking at the subject, looking at all of the different angles that I can get at, and then being able to communicate that to folks, either before the decision is made or after the decision is made, and do so in a way that is done with integrity and honesty. And as a politician now, I guess, I know that we're not going to make everybody happy. I'm not going to make everybody in District 9 happy with every decision that I make. And so it's going to be really critical that I be able to separate, from some of that stuff in a way. I told my wife the other day that to remind me when I'm elected to not look at the comment section all the time, because I can get in trouble. And so I want to make sure that when I make a decision or are part of a decision, that I've really settled with that, and that I've taken a stance, so that I can then go about and feel comfortable talking about why I made that decision to anyone who has a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. And Jay, I'm sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
No, that's right. It's a really great question. This is not, for a 2 or 3 minute window. I could go on probably for hours and hours and hours about this. And not, again, to repeat too much of Tracey and Gene's points, but myself, as a social worker and licensed in PA, as far as keeping up with like current events and staying informed, It's part of my requirements to do continuing education. So every 2 years, I have to do at least 30 credits of continuing education. So I always try to take courses on subjects of, things that I've never heard of and things that are really going to, advance my knowledge in a field. And then, of course, opinions on whatever that subject is, with lots of different diverse speakers and engagements, and just staying up to date on the most recent evidence-based practices in different kinds of techniques and things like that. And Jean, to your point, you don't have to be a politician to you're never going to make everybody happy no matter what you are. It's not a school board thing. That's just life. But, again, as a social worker, that is something that is our reality is, we're not going to make people happy all the time. It's not possible. But we do like to we have this phrase of meeting people where they're at. And I really do take that to heart is, sitting one-on-one or in small groups with people, really to hear what their concerns are, because again, to Tracey's point is sometimes the things that we are fighting about are not what we're actually fighting about. And for things like critical race theory or refugees in schools and, whether or not, we were to believe if those fears were justified or if those fears didn't necessarily make sense to us, they are very real to other people. And so we kind of have to, tease that out. And really see what it is that people are afraid of, and maybe some people, it really is they're really against it because they read something online and they just have it, dead set in their ways that they've made up their mind, and that's fine, because we're not going to be able to appease everybody making decisions. But to Jean's point in the previous question, this idea of, making decisions because they're the right decisions. And sometimes that's how it's going to have to be is despite, a lot of this arguing and fighting, we have to make decisions that are based in facts, based on real evidence. And while public input is important, and I do the same thing as bounce my ideas off of, my husband or, trusted colleagues and advisors and things like that. We still have to make the decision that is good and right and helps, the greatest amount of people. And we could probably get into all the nuances of good and right and what that means, but, I know we don't have the time for it. But just making sure, that we're really hearing what the actual concern is from our constituents or from our colleagues, and not just conflating it, and blowing it up, to something that isn't actually a real concern. And so then in being transparent about, our intentions as school board members and our decision-making process, if we, make a decision that goes against, what, somebody who expressed concerns, if it goes against their ideals. But, being transparent in the decision-making process and saying, I chose A for reasons 1, 2, and 3, so that people can see what your thought process is, and I think that would also, help build trust back up with the board and with the district as well is, people seeing and understanding what our thought processes are and what our decision-making process looks like too.
Thank you so much for that. I had one final question before I hand it over to Miracle. Close us out with the final question and any updates and announcements. And again, this is something that's been alluded to a number of times in our conversation tonight. And it's the issue of over 3,000 students have left the district in the recent past. And I'm sure that number is a number that's still sussing out, due to the number of folks that, have left over the last month, over the summer and into the fall. Guess we can start with Jamie. We'll go with Jamie, Jean, and Tracey on this question. How concerned are you about, what could only be described as a mass exodus out of the district over the last year and a half? And is there any solutions you have in mind in trying to reverse that trend?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, of course, it is something that is concerning, but, even with, what COVID has done to probably districts all across the United States, I don't think this is necessarily something that is unique to PPS, but it is still something, that we should all be concerned with. And Kahari, to your point is, I think that, we are still, trying to figure out what these numbers actually are. How many folks have left the district just to go to online school? How many have gone to charter schools, private schools, or just how many folks have moved out of the city in general? Because we have had a population loss in the city of Pittsburgh proper as well, just within the last census. So I'm sure that these numbers are going to be constantly fluctuating. But I am still concerned because COVID, again, is something that's not going to be going away. And so our schools are going to have to adapt to whatever this future looks like, whether that means having more capabilities for online learning or more of a hybrid schedule, rather than just fully in person, because frankly, I just don't think fully in person is something that is totally possible right now when our students are social distancing only 3 feet instead of, the recommended 6 feet, having proper ventilators and things like that in our classrooms. I just don't think that we even have the infrastructure for whatever the future that COVID brings is. And so, not only public schools should be concerned with that either. We have a lot of old school buildings, whether they are private schools, charter schools. We have repurposed buildings for a lot of our charter schools that might not necessarily be appropriately equipped to handle the changes that COVID's going to bring. And so I don't think this is something that PPS is going to have to decide for itself, like what this future looks like. I think we should really be having conversations with other school districts in Allegheny County, private schools and charter schools, and of course, like the scientists following CDC recommendations and these different things, and really understanding how COVID is going to change, how we learn. So I think that's, I am concerned about these 3,000 students, but I'm not as concerned necessarily for their, I'm sure they're being taught in whatever capacity that they are and that it is sufficient. But these are conversations that we're going to have to be having, in the very near future, so that we don't keep, hemorrhaging students.
So I'm really, I'm really concerned over the continued loss of our students, and I know that it's multifaceted. There are, there are COVID issues, obviously, that are stopping our students. There are access issues, the ability for students to access our schools, the technology, the internet, that are keeping students away. And then there's a credibility issue, unfortunately, with the district. Many of the conversations that I have with parents who choose not to send their kids to Pittsburgh public schools is because they don't trust that we're going to take care of their kids. And so, when I think about declining enrollment, I think about, are we keeping our kids safe? Yes. I also think about, do our parents trust that we're going to do what's best for their kids when we have them? And I don't know if I can say yes to that right now. And so, thinking through what are some of the solutions, it really is going to start with having an open, honest, and transparent search for the new superintendent that takes into account input from the community as to what type of superintendent we should hire. And then we have to go about the work, as I said before, of just earning the right to educate kids here in Pittsburgh and in Pittsburgh public schools. And that starts with making sure that they have safe, attractive schools to go to. It also means that we have to be transparent and honest so that we can rebuild the loss of trust that we've had over the years. And until we do that, we're going to continue to see students leave for private schools, for charter schools, for independent schools to move out of the city. And so, it's going to take not just the work of the school district, it's going to take partnerships with city officials, with county officials, with state officials to make sure that we have the resources necessary. And then our job as the school board is to make sure we hire the absolute best person to run the district going forward, so that we can do the hard work of attracting students back to our district.
Yeah, I join Jean and Jamie in being concerned about the decline in enrollment. I think that we should, sort of dig into what that decline is. We should be examining where kids are going from PPS to where. I think that much of the decline recently is not so much COVID as it is our response to COVID, which was not, as I said before, was not stellar. And so we need to be thinking about how then do we repair what is broken? How then do we repair what happened with COVID, the sort of lapses in organizational capacity, right? To get kids back into school or to get them learning in shorter periods of time. How do we repair that? So we hopefully won't have another COVID-like experience. How do we create the kind of district that is able to handle whatever? It doesn't even have to be another pandemic or tragedy, or just to handle the future. How do we get to the place where our district is well enough managed, it is effective at doing the job of educating kids to providing high quality education for kids every year, all the time, every day. And so that's really what we need to be focused on. And obviously part of that is keeping kids physically safe, and safe from, as far as public health is concerned, keeping them healthy as best we can. But we have to begin to dig into why so many families left, what was breached there, and how do we fix that breach? How do we repair that?
Thank you all so much for your time and your lovely words, and just taking the moment to talk about why you're running and your future endeavors. As we wrap up, I'm going to give you all 30 seconds. So we're going to go Jamie, Jean, Tracey. What is bringing you joy right now? I want to end on a positive note. Just like, what is bringing you joy? It could be whatever you feel comfortable in sharing.
Great. It's a great way to wrap this up. I have still been really into on my crafting bug. So I've been sewing a lot and crocheting a lot, cross stitching, lots of different things just to keep my hands busy. But it's something that is really relaxing at the end of the day. And so that is something that has been keeping me sane and bringing me joy the last couple months.
Yes, I have three quick things that are really just make my day each and every day. One is both of my kids are off at college, and being able to talk with them even more now than when they were home just brings me a lot of joy as I hear about how they're growing and changing. The second is because my kids are at school, I get to spend a lot more time with my wife, and not as the mother of my kids, but just as my best friend. And then just personally, like Jamie said, I've hit some personal weightlifting goals recently, which are really exciting to know that the old man can still get it done in the gym. So that's what's bringing me joy right now.
So I am like Jean in that one of my children is away at college, and just it's bringing me joy to how our relationships are changing. My daughter who's here, I have a different relationship with her now that she's the only one home. I have a different relationship with my son who was away. I have a different relationship with my husband. So that those changing relationships and the closeness that I'm feeling with my family is really bringing me joy. And I'm not crafting or weightlifting. I'm just chatting with my kids.
All right. Well, that is our time with you all. Thank you so much for joining us for our fall forum, the school board candidate edition. We wish you all the best of luck and in your future endeavors, and hopefully we'll have you back before you're swearing in December. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
And yes, and what we alluded to at the top of the hour, the current school board members are actually starting the process to interview the interim superintendent. So Veronica Edwards and Terry Kennedy could not be with us tonight. We have extended the opportunity for them to send in statements or to do a conversation at a later date. But like we said at the very beginning, you have 2 more weeks to register to vote. To put in your registration by the 18th. Please make sure you register to vote if you are going to be 18 by November 2nd. So if you're in high school, you're a little over 17 and a half, you're able to register to vote in the November 2nd election. If you recently moved, changed your address, changed your name, you need to make sure you go through and update your information. We do not want anyone to have any problems on election day, so please make sure you're registered to vote. For the rest of the week, the Wanda Hood Media Network has a lot of programs for you. Tomorrow, we're talking about the census. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but with those 3,000 students, there's also been 13,000 Black people who are no longer in the city. So we're looking at that census data for what Black Pittsburgh needs to know Tuesday at 2. There's been a lot of stuff going on. Today we've seen the pictures of, Black Haitian immigrants being whipped at the border. We know the situation that happened at Barrel and Flow. So we're going to be talking about that for Wednesday for this week in white supremacy. We know that it's been hard going on with, the pandemic and getting back to work. So we want to talk about your mental health this month. So Thursday at noon, we have on Tilt with Julius Boatwright and Mama Brown, just to talk about ways you're able to protect your mental health this time. We also have some really cool events coming up, so please make sure you stay tuned, you like and subscribe us on our YouTube pages or Facebook pages, as well as our Twitter and Instagram pages, so you can get the information as soon as we post it, so you're able to stay up to date and involved what's going on with One Hood Power.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to again thank Jamie Piotrowski, Tracey Reed, and Jean Walker for joining us this evening for a very in-depth conversation about the Pittsburgh School Board and their vision for their tenure when they become members of that board at the end of the year going into January. One other thing that I'll add, next Monday will be our district magistrate forum, and we will be joined by Leah Duncan Williams. We will also be joined by Hillary Wheatley Taylor, and as well as Holly Hickling. So please make sure to join us next Monday. And 2 weeks from today, we will have our mayoral forum with Tony Moreno and Ed Gainey will be joining us. And on the 11th of October, we'll have candidates running for city and county council. And then finally, closing out our 6-part series of forums will be the members of the Slate of 5. And that would be Lisa Middleman and Nicola Henry Taylor and Renner Watson and Chelsea Wagner, as well as Tiffany Sizemore. will be joining us on October 18th, and we will continue to have more conversations, whether it's the Sunday night sit down or other platforms, with One Hood of Power to talk to some of the other candidates who will be running for office as well. But again, I want to thank Jamie Piotrowski, Jean Walker, and Tracey Reed for joining us tonight. And please join us next Monday for our District Magistrate Forum. And with that, we are going to close out this edition of the One Hood Power Hour, our Pittsburgh School Board Candidate Forum. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next Monday at our District Magistrate Forum. Take care.